Hello everyone and welcome to another video in this channel. So, the results, well not the results, the final renders for weapon contest are in. I got a chance to see them. We have, I'm not gonna show them yet. Let me just check here real quick. That's the project that we're gonna be doing in just a second. We have 12 submissions, so good number, I would say, good number. We will have one dedicated video probably tomorrow or the day after tomorrow where I'm gonna be doing a feedback for the things that I would change or improve on the technical side of things. I'm not gonna be giving a lot of feedback on the design side of things. It's more about the technical side of things, such as like a modeling, texturing, rendering, stuff like that. I've sent the image to the instructors already. Everyone's gonna be voting. They're gonna say or select one winner, like the big winner, and a couple of honorable mentions. And again, as soon as I get the results back, I'll let you guys know. So today we're gonna be doing something related to November the 2nd, which here in Mexico is Dia de Muertos. Dia de Muertos is a very famous Mexican tradition. I think it became even more famous a couple of years ago thanks to the movie Coco from Pixar. I'm pretty sure most of you guys have seen that one. I'm gonna say it's not exactly like the movie. You know, movies tend to exaggerate or change a couple of things here and there. We do celebrate it, and it's not. Especially here in the north, I'm in the north of Mexico. We don't do it as like intensely as they do it in the south. This is, I think, a little bit more of a I wouldn't say it's like a southern tradition because we do celebrate it everywhere, but we don't decorate as like heavily as what you see right here. There is some decoration here in the city, for instance, but they take it really, really, really seriously in the south. There is a very cool place called Pátzcuaro. You guys ever want to see like the actual like the most epic like Dia de los Muertos celebration, you need to book a vacation for Pátzcuaro, Michoacan, which is again on the south of Mexico. It's an island. It's this island right here in the middle of a big lake, and they decorate the whole island. It's just amazing. It's like I've never been there, but I've seen like the pictures, and it's just like unbelievable. So yeah, one of the traditions that we have is the pan de muerto. Pan de muerto is a again like a like a little dessert that we normally eat in the to commemorate the death. And again, just like a rough like idea of how the tradition works. This is a day to remember those who passed away. So we build altars. Some people do them like very like basically. Other people do like the tradition, which has to have I think 7 rows, and each row represents a different thing, and then on each row there has to be specific things. For instance, on the first row it's the favorite food of whoever passed, and then the favorite drinks, and then like the favorite hobbies and stuff like that. So everything has a meaning. Again, I haven't like actually celebrated it like, super specific as they normally do. But one of the things that you normally have on your altar is this little thing right here, which is a pan de muerto. So I want to show you. I want to talk about the render, and this case is going to be Arnold rendering. Someone has been asking about like shaders and stuff, so I'm going to be covering a couple of things with this particular asset. Now, I asked one of my artists here in the studio to help me because we've been flooded with work, and I need to delegate a couple of things. Otherwise, I would never be able to finish things. And he actually modeled and textured a very nice little breath. So I'm going to go File, Import. I'm thinking about whether or not to give this one to you as well, guys. If you guys want these assets, just let me know in the comments, and I'll be happy to send all of this information. So here we go. We have the FBX. So it's this little bread right here. Quite nice on geometry, quite a little bit heavy. We're going for this sort of like cinematic or a little bit more cinematic approach, and we're gonna have it right here. So I'm gonna do a very quick plate for this thing. There's a couple of different ways to do a plate. I am just gonna use a cylinder, to be honest. Gonna grab the cylinder right here, push it up, and then I'm gonna isolate it first. I'm gonna grab this vertex. Control F11 is a good shortcut to grab that. I'm gonna offset this a little bit, and then do an extrusion, bring it down, and offset it a little bit more. There we go. And then I'm gonna grab this guy right here. I'm gonna bevel it quite heavily. That's it. That's pretty much it. Just a nice plate. I know some plates like this ones they get like a little bit of an extra bevel on those areas, right? And we get like very basic traditional plate. So let's make this plate a little bit bigger, something like this. I do believe this guy is like modeled in real world scale, or at least close to it. Remember, the 1 cube inside of Maya is 1 centimeter. This one I scaled up. Actually, it's scaled up. Let's make this like, I would say like 10 centimeters across. So it will be roughly about that. And the reason why I want to make sure scales are working properly when we're talking about rendering, the real world scale is really, really, really important to get the best possible effect. So we're gonna have a table, and then we're gonna have the breadth. Let's immediately go for a camera. Camera is gonna be really important. Panels, look to selected, and let's find a nice like shot. Just I think something like this is perfectly fine. Cool. So rendering. Whenever I teach about rendering, I always mention that rendering has three main components: lights, materials, and textures. Okay. So let's very quickly throw in a Skydome light. And I do believe we have a basic one. You guys know Polyhaven is the place to go for Skydome lights. Trying to keep this short and at the same time concise, that I can get your attention, because we have a lot of people that start looking at the videos and then they just go do something else. So let's go for, I do believe we have like the old studio small. There we go. Not that one. It's another one that I have. Decor shop, no. Canon, no. Oh, I thought I had another one. I don't want to use this one. The studio is way too um like produced, right? Let's do something a little bit more natural. I'm gonna go to Polyhaven, and there's like this one. This one, I love this one. It's the Brown Studios. It's something that you might find on someone's home, right? I'm gonna show this thing. Let's copy and move it to our projects real quick. So remember, every time we're working inside of Maya, the best thing you can do is keep your stuff on the source images folder. Why? Because when you try to get something new, or a new image, it will automatically go there. I'm gonna grab this thing. I'm gonna rotate the image because I want to see a little bit of the background. It's probably gonna be like a blurred background. There we go. So I want the window on this sort of side. And that's it. We can already throw in or check a render to see how things look. I actually like doing this. Some people like to wait until the very end to do the renders. I like to be doing them as we move along, so that we can see how things are looking, right? So that's looking okay. Let's start throwing some basic materials, and here's where we're gonna start talking about the shading. First of all, well, before I do that, I'm just gonna change this to GPU to make this renders a little bit faster. Make sure that it works. First time you do GPU, it usually takes like a little bit for things to warm up and stuff. Just be patient when using GPU. If you have a powerful graphics card, I strongly recommend you use GPU. It's like incredible time saving option there. So let's just wait a little bit here. Sometimes I like to just like cancel it and start it over again. Kind of like, there we go. Make it work. As you can see, super fast. Let's stop this. I'm gonna go for this thing right here, and one of the things I'm gonna do is I'm actually gonna remove the camera contribution. That way, when we take a render, we're not gonna see the element. It seems like we have two Skydome lights. Let's delete the first one. That's why we're getting these very weird colors. There we go. That looks way better, more natural looking, right? Like a nice light coming from the window. Now let's start with the plate. Easiest one. Just right click, assign a new material, and we're going to be using an Arnold AI standard surface. And the most basic material that you guys are going to be working with is called a reflective material. Okay, and materials, all of the materials inside of pretty much any software that you're going to find have four main maps: a color map, a roughness map, a specular map or a metalness map, and a normal map. Those are the four most commonly used maps that you're gonna get. So what each of those do is pretty obvious. Well, not super obvious for some of them. Let's start with the color. Color, as the name implies, is just the color of the object. So in this case, I'm gonna go for like a beige color for my plate, and there we go. And of course, if we were to render this, you're gonna see that we get a nice like beige render. There's actually a very common like Mexican thing called Talavera. I'm not sure we're gonna be able to do it right now, but this is a very common, again, Mexican like thing. And it's more texture, right? But ceramic, so it's like this white ceramic with this like blue details. There's another one, green metal Mexico. I never remember what the name of that is. Wait. can't remember. It's like some sort of steel with like paint and stuff, but that's fine. So I'm gonna go here and we're gonna reduce the saturation a little bit more to keep it like lighter. And now we can start playing around with the next pattern, which is this specular channel, right? So here in the specular is how much light the object receives and then bounces back into the world. And in this case, I want this thing to be a little bit shinier. So I'm gonna bring the roughness down. It's not gonna be a rough element. What that will do is you're going to see that the reflection on the plate is going to be way cleaner, way like if it had a sort of again like some sort of glaze on top, right? Like a new plate that we have right there. Normally on the roughness channel, we add a texture so that certain parts of the element are a little bit shinier and certain parts of the element are not as shiny. And here I'm gonna do exactly that with this little bread. So I'm thinking I'm gonna give you guys the tools. Here inside of Maya, we have this substance option. There's a really cool option, which is this apply workflow to maps, which allows us to create a shader that has all of the maps already attached. So I'm going to do it right now like this, just to, again, save a little bit of time, but I'm going to explain what each of these do. So base color, as you can expect, it's the base color of the bread. Metalness is whether some parts of the bread are metal or not. In this case, we don't have any metalness. And then normal map is the details that you're gonna get, like the roughness or on the surface. It's a fake way to add detail to the surface. And finally, roughness is, as the name implies, like things that are gonna be a little bit rougher or not. When I hit select, and as you can see, they automatically go to their slots. And I'm gonna hit apply. And the reason why this is so useful is because if we jump here to the hypershade, which is where all of the material magic happens, you're gonna see that we have this AI standard, which we're gonna call M pan, Annie's breath in Spanish. And if we change this, as you can see, all of them went to the specific slot, to the color slot, to the roughness slot, and they have all of the specific things that we need to make sure are there to get the result that we're expecting. So now I can just right click this object, assign an existing material, and select the new material that we created, the pan material. We're not seeing the textures. You can press number 6, and sometimes with some materials, you might be able to see them. There is an option. I don't like using it because it's really performance heavy on the computer, but there is an option to see the elements. I'm gonna press play. It's gonna convert the textures. This is very important. It's gonna create a texture file from the images that I just added to the scene, and then I'm gonna see the display here on the little breath. So that's like the very basic way in which you can create a material. You can either create a material and just modify the parameters so that you get what you're looking for, or if you already have the maps created somewhere else, you can connect the maps to their specific input and get a result like the one we're seeing here. And by the way, if you guys want to learn a little bit about this whole process more in depth, I do have a course called Complete Guide to Maya 2022, and you can check that one out in Skillshare. Hey guys, Abraham here. I just want to remind you guys that we upload all of our courses to Skillshare. Skillshare is this amazing site where you can access a ton of different content to learn, improve, and grow as an artist. We have all of our courses available to watch and learn from right now in Skillshare. You can check the description down here, and Skillshare is offering 1 free month trial to their premium membership. With this membership, you're going to be able to access all of our courses and watch and learn all of the amazing things that we cover with all of the softwares. So, what are you waiting for? Check Skillshare down here below. There we go. Whoop. There we go. So we also have this courses on other platforms such as Udemy in case you guys want. So this looks okay, right? But as you can see, the roughness of the element is pretty uniform. And if we were to go to the image and check the roughness map, you're gonna realize that, hey, what the hell? The roughness map is exactly gray. It's just a middle gray. So we're pretty much telling the bread we want you to be evenly rough across the surface. And that's not usually what happens. Some parts of the bread can look flatter and some parts can look a little bit shinier. So how can we like create something a little bit different? This is where shading, which is the modification of textures and stuff here inside of what's the word of Maya, we can get a different effect. So we know that this base color right here, this texture, is a nice like color texture. What we could do is we could multiply this element against the roughness to get some changes in value. So I'm going to use a multiply node. I'm just going to hitting tab and going for a multiply node. So we're going to do a multiply divide. And we're going to multiply the color of my color, which is that one, against the color of my roughness. And this is what we get. We get the dark image, right? The darker image. The darker you go, the shinier the object is gonna go. Now, unfortunately, we can't just plug this into the roughness. As you can see, it doesn't let us, because what the roughness is expecting is just a single value from 1 to 0, from 0 to 1, a single value of how rough something is. So the first thing I'm gonna do is I'm gonna use something called an SHA remap HSV. There we go. Remap HSV. We're gonna get a color into this node. And one of the cool things about this one, this is pretty much like using A levels inside of Photoshop. Well, it's not like a level, it's literally like a hue and saturation. So let's bring the saturation all the way down. This is gonna give us a more interesting texture, and we're gonna get certain parts that are gonna be shinier and certain parts that are gonna be darker, right? Now, again, the problem is that we can't just map this into the roughness because we change it. We need to change this into a float. So there's one thing called AI to float, I believe. AI vector. It's not the AI. Okay, I'm just gonna keep it even simpler. We're just gonna grab the red channel, which pretty much holds most of the information. So we're gonna get this into the specular roughness. Now let's go back to the render. And if we save an image to compare and we render again, you're gonna see now that the bread is way shinier, super shiny actually. Why? Because remember, the darker the color gets, the more shiny it gets, the more reflective. So it looks like it has like a glaze of sugar or something. Which, if this is what you're going for, then fine. But in this case, I kind of want to keep it a little bit different. Now the remap is really good because one of the things that we can do with the remap is we can actually play around with the value. So if we bring the value down, everything becomes darker. And if we bring the value up, everything becomes wider, right? So we can, if we go to the clear colors like here, you're gonna see that things on the render are gonna look a lot flatter, right? Like a lot rougher in this case. As you can see, we get a very nice distribution of the roughness. And again, if we compare it, you can see that there's slight changes here and there on the texture, and not everything is exactly the same. Again, at any point, I can just go back to the shader and say, hey, maybe, you know what, I want to push the whites even like a little bit higher, something like that. And let's see how this looks. Go, let's render again. It's gonna be even flatter, so a little bit closer to what we had before. But as you can see, things are moving, so we're gonna get a little bit of a different effect here and there with the breath. So that's one of the things that we can do. Let's do one more thing. This is very common, by the way. If you've done the Blender Gurus like donut, it's very similar techniques. That's why I always, when people ask me what's better, Blender or Maya, they're pretty much the same thing. If you can learn how to do one thing on one of the softwares, it's very easy to jump in and do something similar on another software. I'm gonna go here. I'm gonna press B, which is soft selection. I'm gonna double click my movement tool, and on the soft selection, I'm gonna change the fall off to surface, so we're only moving the little like breadstick. We're just gonna bring this down. Let's go for shot again, and there we go. This Arnold and red. And there we go. So things are looking good, but we can make this thing look even better. When I started this project, I thought that we were going to be able to cover all of the things that I want to show you fast, but I don't think we're going to be able to do that. So I'm actually going to be dividing this into two parts. Today, we're going to do the basic like building of the shaders, and tomorrow I'm going to show you how to do the sugar glaze, because we're going to be using a Bifrost to do that. And it's a little bit more tricky, but it can be done, and we can get a very nice result. So what we're gonna do here, or what I want to do here, is I want to talk about displacement. So displacement is a thing that we can do inside of all of the 3D packages that will modify the surface. As you can see right now, the surface looks very round, very smooth. This might be perfect for like a stylized or cartoon or something, but if we want to go realistic, we know that there's usually like bumpiness everywhere, right? Well, the way displacement works inside of Maya is a little bit different than it works in other softwares. So what I need to do here is I'm gonna hit tab, and I'm gonna create something called a displacement shader. And then, as you can see, this displacement shader creates this thing called a shader group. And I'm just gonna drop this into the displacement shader. We don't need this displacement group because we already have this one on the bread itself. Now here on the displacement, we can input what we want to displace. Right now, we're not displacing anything. And I'm gonna look for a noise, just a noise texture. As you can see right here, it's just a very basic just noise texture. I don't know why it takes longer to change here, but we should be seeing this. So I can bring the color and grab like the R channel and get this into the displacement map. And what this will do is on render time, it's gonna push the vertices of our object and create like this pattern. So I'm gonna do it like this for now. And if we try to render, by the way, let me save real quick because render displacement can break things, can crash things rather. If we try to render now or to displace right now, you can see this. Looks amazing, right? It's just like it just tried moving the different vertices of our element into a lot of different places and it just exploded our mesh. So how do we fix this? Very easy. First of all, we need to change the scale of our displacement. So if we go to the displacement here and we go to the displacement shader, you're gonna see that the scale is set to 1. If we bring this back to 0.1, for instance, what should happen is we're not gonna have as much displacement. And see how nice and interesting we can get this bread to look. It's looking a lot more interesting than what we had. Still looks bad, right? But it's looking better. Another thing we can do, and this is important to know about displacement, the more geometry you have, the more detail you're going to get from the displacement. So we don't want to have a lot of geometry here because it could crash Maya, but we do want to have the geometry at render time. And the way to do that is selecting this guy right here, going to the shape node, and if you go to Arnold, we're going to say, hey, I want you to use a subdivision called cat mode Clark, and I want you to do, let's say, 3 subdivisions. So at render time, you're going to divide 3 times. You're going to get a lot of different polygons. And what that will allow me to get is we're going to be able to get even more detail on our displacement. Maybe 3 times was a little bit too much. Let's see if we can get it to work. There we go. It did work. So it didn't crash, which is it's a good thing. But still, the scale a little bit too big. So here's where we can start playing around with parameters of our displacement to find what we need. So let's try something like 0.05. Let's hit a render. Just wait a little bit for this to load. There we go. That looks a little bit better. I think we're not distorting the surface as much, but we're getting some nice effect, nice like crackling here and there. Now, once we have something like this, I'm going to stop this and we can go to the noise element and we can play around with the noise. This is the sample that we're seeing here. So if we change the threshold, we're going to get like a more like a flatter look. Dark points are going to go down and white points are going to go up. Let's bring the amplitude down so as you can see we get more variations there on the textures. That should also give me more variations here on the bread as well. Okay, that's a little bit better, but now since we reduced the threshold here, we might need to go to the displacement options and say, hey, you know what, like push the displacement a little bit higher, right? Give me just a little bit more displacement. Keep in mind that this is quite expensive. Doing displacement is one of those things that really pushes our computers into to high levels. I'm actually going to bring this thing down, see if we can work in real time. Let's render there. And again, we can go to the displacement and let's try like a 1. The 1 is going to be way too much. I'm already sensing it. There we go. So let's go 0.15, for instance. There we go. We get this very interesting puffy effect. I think that's a little bit too much. Let's go back to 0.1. What I want to do is I want to go to noise and maybe increase the ratio a little bit. See what that gives us. Or maybe change the frequency ratio, which is going to give us a smaller details. You can see right there, we get smaller and smaller. Let me pause this. I'm really going to bring the frequency ratio up. And let's see how we get. There we go. That looks a little bit more like breath, like the poorest things of breath. But we're definitely going to go to the displacement and say something like 0.03. Not bad, huh? Not bad. Looking good. I think we might have gone a little bit heavy on the frequency ratio. Let's bring it back to 4. There we go. As you can see, we can get something really, really interesting in pretty much no time. Now, before we finish today's video, because I mentioned we're going to do this in 2 parts. Today is just the basic shaders. Tomorrow we're going to take a look at the sugar with Bifrost, and I'm also going to show you how to do like a cinematic or more a realistic looking render. There's one more thing I want to do, and that has to do with the way bread looks. Bread usually has a little bit of something called subsurface. Subsurface is one of those like advanced looking things. It is advanced, but you can learn it like pretty easily. It's just a little bit more resource intensive on the computer, and it's how light goes through objects. So if we look subsurface scattering breadth, you're gonna see that bread does have a little bit of subsurface scattering. Like if you wanna get like some really nice looking bread renders in this case, having a little bit of subsurface scattering is gonna make sure that it doesn't look like it's all CG. So the way we get subsurface scattering is actually on the material itself. It's down here. It's on the subsurface option. But if we turn the subsurface on and we just try to render, you're gonna see something horrible, horrible happening. We lose the color. Why? Because when you're using subsurface scattering, you need to remap the color that we have back here down here. There's a couple of ways to do it. Easiest one is to go into the hypershade, as we've done before. Go into the bread, the pan element here. And I'm gonna grab my base color, which is this one, and I'm just gonna plug it in on the subsurface color. Okay. And that should bring us back the color. Now, see how different this looks? Look at the difference between this bread right here and this one right here. This one looks very like the crust is like super tight and you're not seeing through the bread. And this one right here, we're actually seeing a little bit through the bread, and that's why we can see this sort of like yellowish effect. But the problem is it kind of looks like a little bit like jelly, right? And we don't want that. So that's where we need to, again, start playing around with the parameters of our element, of our material on the subsurface tab. I'm going to go to the subsurface tab, and as you can see, we have the subsurface color already there. We can change the radius. The radius is the kind of color that we're going to see through. If I change this to red, we're going to see red going through. If I change this to yellow, we're going to see yellow going through. So I'm going to go for like an orangey feel, I would say. Something like this. Scale, this is the important factor. Scale is going to tell us how intense or not this subsurface is. If we have a really big scale, what's going to happen is this looks like gummy, right? Like a gummy bear or something, because we're letting light go through the whole thing, and we're seeing this like subsurfacey effect. And if we bring this all the way down to something like a 0.5, for instance, what that will do is now it's going to be a little bit less obvious where the subsurface is. There's still a little bit of subsurface, but it's not going to be as obvious. I think even for this one, I'm going to go for something like a 0.3. I don't want to add a lot of subsurface, just a little bit there to make sure this looks a little bit better. So from this to this, right? And as you can see, this already looks a little bit more like a realistic piece of bread. If you have a light on the other side of the bread, like what we're seeing right here, you're gonna see a little bit more subsurface, because subsurface is really light dependent. So let's say I were to grab this image, the HDRI. If I move the window to the back and I render, you're gonna see that we're gonna get a little bit more subsurface, especially on this, like they're called the fingers or the bones of the bread. So again, just tweak around depending on the scale of your scene and then the scale of the rest of the environment. Tweak it so that you find the perfect balance for what you're going for. I'm gonna grab this thing right here because I want to create like a very nice thumbnail image for you guys. And I'm gonna just do a standard surface. It's gonna be black. Let's just render. Sorry, just black. Let's increase the opacity there a little bit. We get a nice little reflection there. And that's pretty much it. Now, final thing before we wrap this video. As you can see, the camera could be better. Let's push the camera up a little bit so we can see the little like sphere on the top of the breath. There we go. That looks a little bit better. I'm even tempted to just grab this thing and make it humongously big so that we don't see it. And like a top view. There we go. That looks way better. So one of the things that you might notice here is the noise, right? Like we have a lot of noise on the scene. Subsurface tends to be very noisy. And there's two main ways to counteract noise. First of all is on the render settings up here. We can make the image bigger. So by making the image bigger to like a full HD, one of the things that's going to happen, of course, is we're going to have more pixels. And with more pixels, the noise is going to be smaller. So we're not going to be able to notice all of this effect. And once we have this, we can actually add an imager called the denoiser optics, which is going to clean the image and give us this result. Now, it's not great. You can see that it looks a little bit blurry, a little bit weird. And that's because, again, we need to up the samples a little bit. So on the Arnold renderer here, I'm going to jump to adaptive sampling. I'm going to enable this. I'm going to say, hey, I want 10 samples on my camera. So that should give the render. It will take the render a little bit longer. You can see the progress bar down here. But as it keeps going and going and analyzing the image, is going to give us a more exact and more realistic looking render. Now, the denoiser can actually be like a blended. Like if you feel like the denoiser is a little bit too much and you want a little bit of grain and noise on your render, you can just bring this blend down a little bit here. You can see that's with no blend. That's with a little bit of blend. But look at how nice the distortion of the of the bumpiness of the noise makes this thing look. Like just by adding that little displacement and playing around with the shaders, we can get a really, really nice piece. It took us 30 minutes to get this piece. Now, again, I'm going to show you how to make this thing look even better tomorrow when we add the sugar on top. So that's it, guys. If you're celebrating Dia de Muertos, then I hope you can honor and remember all of the departed in the best of lights. And yeah, that's it for now. Make sure to like, share, subscribe. I'll see you back on the next one. Bye bye.